What if I told you that the song playing at every country funeral, every wedding, every last dance, was almost never released? And that's not even the most shocking one on this list. Stick around. Because by the time we get to number 1, you're going to hear something that changes how you listen to country music forever. Number 10, He Stopped Loving Her Today. George Jones. George Jones recorded that vocal in 1980 and reportedly told producer Billy Sherrill that it was the worst song he'd ever heard.
Every single I love.
Let that land for a moment. The man who would go on to sing arguably the greatest country song ever recorded thought the song was a disaster.
Still love her through it all.
He hated it so much that it took multiple recording sessions just to get him back in the booth. So why did they keep pushing? What did Sherrill hear that Jones didn't?
Found love letters.
The song had been written by Bobby Braddock and Curly Putman. It had already been sitting around Nashville for years, passed over, rewritten, rearranged.
First time I'd seen.
It went through so many versions, it barely resembled itself. And when Jones finally laid down the vocal, fragile, trembling, utterly broken, even the people in the studio weren't sure what they had. The first time Jones heard the finished mix, reportedly, he wept. Not because he was moved, because he thought it was going to embarrass him.
Oh, and we all wondered if she would.
But then April 1980 arrived. He Stopped Loving Her Today was released as a single. Within weeks, radio stations were being flooded with requests, not trickles, floods. People calling in, asking for it to be played again and again.
They placed a wreath upon his door.
It climbed to number 1 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart, where it stayed for 2 weeks. It won the Country Music Association Award for Single of the Year in 1980 and again in 1981.
Today.
Back to back. 2 consecutive years. That almost never happens. Rolling Stone would later name it the greatest country song of all time. Not one of the greatest. The greatest.
Well, this time, he's over her.
And George Jones, the man who called it the worst song he'd ever heard, said in later interviews that it saved his career. That at the lowest point of his life, amid the addiction and the chaos and the wreckage, that song reached out and pulled him back to solid ground. Some songs don't just survive rejection.
This time, he's over her for good.
They survive everything. Coming up, a song that got banned from radio before most people ever heard it. And the ban only made it bigger. Number 9, The Thunder Rolls, Garth Brooks, 1990.
And the thunder rolls.
Garth Brooks was already rising, but he hadn't yet become the phenomenon that would make him the best-selling solo artist in American history.
Raindrops on the windshield, there's a storm.
He was still proving himself, and he released a song called The Thunder Rolls. A dark, cinematic story about a cheating husband, a suspicious wife, and a night that ends in violence. Radio played it.
That he never should have been. And the thunder rolled.
Listeners loved it. And then the music video aired on TNN and CMT.
Rose and the lightning strikes.
Within 24 hours, both networks pulled it. The video depicted domestic violence, the wife shooting her abusive husband. It was raw.
As the storm blows all out of.
It was unflinching. And the country music establishment was not prepared for it. CMT issued a statement.
The thunder rolled.
TNN followed. The video was gone. Now here's the question everybody was asking. Does banning a music video in 1990 kill a song? Or does it ignite it?
She's waiting by the window when he pulls into the drive.
It ignited it. The controversy made national news. Garth Brooks appeared on television defending the video, defending the story, defending the right to show the reality of what domestic violence looks like.
The thunder rolls and the lightning strikes.
Suddenly, people who'd never listened to country music were paying attention. The Thunder Rolls reached #1 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart. It won the Country Music Association Award for Video of the Year, for a video that 2 major networks refused to broadcast. Let that irony sit with you.
And the lightning strikes. Another love grows cold.
But here's what gets lost in the controversy. The songwriting itself is extraordinary. The imagery, the thunder, the lightning.
The thunder rolls.
The woman watching headlights come up the driveway. It's Hitchcock in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. Garth Brooks didn't write it to be provocative. He wrote it because the story was true for millions of people who needed someone to say it out loud. The networks tried to silence it. Instead, they amplified it into a cultural moment that country music still talks about today. And speaking of songs that made people uncomfortable, this next one was almost too personal to even release.
Like a ghost town on a moonlit summer night.
#8, Independence Day. Martina McBride, 1994.
But Mama was proud and she stood her ground.
Martina McBride had a voice that could strip paint off a wall in the most beautiful possible way.
Folks talk, but everybody looked the other way.
But she was still finding her footing. Her label wasn't sure about this particular song.
Around in a small town, they said he was a danger.
Written by Gretchen Peters, Independence Day told the story of a woman who burns down her house with her abusive husband inside. Not a metaphor. Literally burns it down. Radio programmers read the lyric sheet and balked.
So I took myself down to the fair in town.
Some stations refused to add it. The concerns were real. This was not a comfortable song. It was angry.
On Independence Day.
It was specific. And it was about a woman who fought back in the most extreme way imaginable. So here's the thing that doesn't make sense on paper. Why would a song this dark, this specific, this uncomfortable connect with mainstream country audiences? Because it was true. Not factually, but emotionally, spiritually. deeply true for a generation of women who had never once heard their story on country radio.
Flames and took down some names and sent me to the county.
The song made its way to listeners anyway. Word of mouth, women calling radio stations, requesting it specifically, relentlessly, passionately. It peaked at number 12 on the country charts. Not a number one, technically not a massive chart smash.
To the county.
But the awards season told the real story. It won the Country Music Association Award for Video of the Year. It won the Academy of Country Music Award for Video of the Year. Martina McBride performed it at the CMA Awards in 1994 and received a standing ovation before the last chord had even finished ringing. Gretchen Peters, who wrote it, had written the song partly from personal experience. Partly from stories she'd witnessed. She has said in interviews that she wasn't sure anyone would ever record it. That it felt too much like something radio wouldn't touch. She was right that radio was nervous. She was wrong that it didn't matter. Independence Day became an anthem. Not just a country song, an anthem.
So I took myself down to the fair.
A song that gave language to pain that had never been spoken on a mainstream stage.
Independence Day.
30 years later, it still stops a room. But the next story is different.
To be in the way. So I took myself down.
This one isn't about controversy. It's about an artist who was simply told, to his face,
She knew she was on the losing end.
that he didn't have what it takes.
Was proud and she stood her ground. She knew she was on the losing.
Number 7. Friends in Low Places. Garth Brooks. Here's a detail that almost nobody knows. Friends in Low Places, the song that would become one of the most recognizable anthems in country music history. The song that turns any bar into a sing-along. The song that Garth Brooks performed on television. And watched an entire audience lose their minds, was not originally written for him. It was written by Dwayne Blackwell and Earl Bud Lee, and was being shopped around Nashville when Brooks's team heard it. And even after he recorded it, there were people internally at his label, Capitol Nashville, who weren't sure it was the right single choice. Too rowdy, some said. Too on the nose. Now ask yourself, can you imagine country radio in 1990 not playing this song? It seems absurd from where we're standing. But that's the thing about hindsight. It makes genius look obvious. In the moment, genius is always the weird bet. What was it that made the label nervous? The tone, the irreverence, the fact that the narrator shows up drunk to his ex's wedding and doesn't apologize for it. country radio had boundaries, and this song walked right up to them. It was released in August 1990. It debuted at number 1. Debuted. Right at the top, it stayed there for 4 weeks. It won the Country Music Association Award for Single of the Year. And the music video, Brooks in a cowboy hat, performing it like a man who absolutely could not believe how good life was, became one of the defining images of early 90s country. And the album it came from, No Fences, went on to sell over 17 million copies in the United States alone. It remains one of the best-selling country albums in history. And the 3-verse version, with a quiet, unreleased third verse that Brooks occasionally performed live, became the stuff of legend.
Inside and out, doesn't it?
Bootlegs circulated. People hunted for it. It turned a hit into a mythology, for a song that made some label executives nervous about its rowdiness. Sometimes the thing that makes people nervous is the thing that makes history. But we're only halfway through, and the stories get harder from here. This next one, the artist almost didn't make it out to tell it.
So I have no fear of saying, I bet you guys know there's another verse.
Number 6, I Will Always Love You, Dolly Parton. Most people, when they hear this title, think of Whitney Houston.
In your way. And
The 1992 Bodyguard version, the vocal performance that became the definition of power ballad, the song that sold millions worldwide.
I'll be taken with me.
But here's what rewrites the whole story. Dolly Parton wrote I Will Always Love You in 1973. Not as a romantic love song, as a farewell to her mentor and business partner, Porter Wagoner,
Please, don't you cry, 'cause we both know.
from whom she was separating professionally. It was a breakup song between collaborators, a thank you, a goodbye. And she was terrified to sing it for him.
But you know what? Above all of this,
When she finally played it for Wagner, sitting across from the man who had given her a national platform, the man she owed so much to, he wept. And then he said,
I hope life would treat you kind.
"That's the best song you'll ever write." She recorded it. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart in 1974. The first of 2 times the original Dolly Parton version would top that chart.
Would treat you kind. And I hope that
Because she recorded it again in 1982 for the film The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, and it hit number 1 a second time. Then Elvis Presley wanted to record it.
I wish you love.
His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, reached out. They wanted the publishing rights. And Dolly Parton, who was not yet the global icon she would become, who was still building,
Love you.
still hustling, said no. She turned down Elvis Presley because she believed in the value of what she'd created, because she had learned, perhaps from years watching how the industry worked,
I'll always.
that your songs are your legacy, and nobody was going to buy that one from her. When Whitney Houston's version became a phenomenon, Dolly Parton received half the publishing royalties from every single copy sold, which, Given that the song topped charts in multiple countries
In your way.
and became one of the best-selling singles of all time, translated into what she has described as the biggest single check she ever received. She reportedly said she cried when she heard Houston's version, and then she cried for a different reason when she saw the royalty statement.
I guess that's all I'll be taking.
A song written as a quiet goodbye to a business partner, turned down by labels, turned down by Elvis,
Goodbye. Please.
and it went on to become one of the most covered, most performed, most commercially successful songs in the history of popular music.
Be taken with me.
Dolly Parton trusted herself when nobody told her to. That is the whole lesson, right there.
But I
If these stories are hitting different, if you're seeing these songs in a whole new light, go ahead and subscribe.
Goodbye. Please, don't you cry.
There's an entire library of stories like these waiting for you, or new videos every week.
Always love you.
But stay with us, because what comes next might be the most unlikely story in this entire countdown.
But treat you kind.
An artist who was rejected not once, not twice, but by every major label in Nashville. Before rewriting what country music could even sound like. Number 5, Crazy, Patsy Cline, 1961.
As you wanted.
Patsy Cline had already broken through with I Fall to Pieces, her first number 1, but she had just been in a near-fatal car accident.
Crazy for feeling.
She was recovering. She had pins in her hip. She was in real pain, physical and financial.
Crazy for feeling so.
And her producer, Owen Bradley, brought her a demo of a song written by a then unknown songwriter named Willie Nelson. The song was called Crazy. Cline's initial reaction was reportedly dismissive. The melody felt strange to her, too jazzy, too swooping. Too unlike the straight country she knew. And singing it with pins in her hip, unable to stand comfortably at the microphone, felt nearly impossible.
Wondering.
So she took it home, lived with it, and something happened. She started to understand what the song was doing.
That my love could hold you.
The way it leaned into the feeling rather than describing it. The way the melody itself felt unstable.
I'm crazy for trying.
Like a person who can't quite get their footing emotionally. She went back into the studio.
And I'm crazy for loving.
And instead of standing at the mic the traditional way, she recorded the vocals seated, leaning close to the microphone, intimate, almost conversational.
I'm crazy.
Crazy peaked at number 2 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart in 1962.
And I'm crazy for love.
Kept from the top spot by another of her own songs. But chart positions don't tell this story. It became the most played jukebox song of the 20th century. not of the decade, of the century. It has been performed and recorded by hundreds of artists across multiple genres. It has appeared in films,
Somebody new.
television shows, and cultural moments too numerous to count. It is, by almost any measure, one of the most enduring songs in American music history.
And then someday you'd leave.
And Willie Nelson, who wrote it, who shopped it, who watched Patsy Cline turn it into something that transcended what he'd even imagined,
Crazy. I'm crazy.
has called it the best thing that ever happened to him as a songwriter. A song she almost didn't record.
You want it.
A vocal she almost couldn't physically deliver. And yet, it became the definition of her legacy.
Myself worry.
Some songs find their singer exactly when both of them need it most. Now, we're in the top 5.
I knew.
And from here on, every single story carries a weight that the ones before it were only building toward. Number 4, Take Me Home, Country Roads. John Denver.
To the place I belong.
This one might surprise you. John Denver was not a country artist. He was a folk singer from Roswell, New Mexico, later associated with Colorado,
Older than the trees, young.
who dressed in plaid shirts and round glasses and sang about mountains. In 1971,
I belong.
the Nashville establishment had very little interest in him. Take Me Home, Country Roads was written by Denver,
Miner's lady, stranger to blue water.
along with Bill Danoff and Taffy Nivert, and it almost wasn't his song to record at all.
Shine, teardrops in my eyes, country road.
He performed it for the first time at a small club show in Washington, D.C., where Danoff and Nivert were the house act.
Me home, country road.
The crowd reaction was immediate and electric, but RCA Records wasn't sure what to do with it.
Country road, take me home.
It didn't fit neatly. It wasn't pure country. It wasn't pure folk. It referenced West Virginia, a state Denver had
Reminds me of my home far away. Private
apparently never even spent significant time in. Critics pointed this out immediately. The song felt to some like a postcard from a place the writer had only visited in imagination.
yesterday, country road.
Did that matter to the people of West Virginia? Not even slightly. The state adopted Take Me Home, Country Roads
I want to hear you now. Country roads, take
as one of its official state songs. Officially, by act of legislature.
me home, that country road.
The song reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 The Pop chart, not even the country chart in 1971.
Mama, take me home.
It sold over 1 million copies that year. It launched John Denver into a career that would produce dozens of hits and make him one of the defining voices of the 1970s.
Country roads, take me home.
And 60-plus years later, you can walk into a bar in Munich or Tokyo or Sydney or Dublin and sing the first line,
That country roads, take me home.
and strangers will finish it with you. A song rejected as too vague, too regional, too hard to categorize. Now it belongs to everyone.
Older than the trees, younger than...
That is the quiet miracle of a song that simply refuses to be put in a box. But the next entry, this one almost destroyed the artist before it saved him.
These country roads say, take me home.
Number 3, The Dance, Garth Brooks. Yes, Garth Brooks again.
For a moment.
But this story is entirely different, and it might be the most personally painful on this list. The Dance was written by Tony Arata and had been floating around Nashville for years before Brooks heard it at a writer's showcase in 1988. He was not yet famous. He was playing small venues, hustling for a record deal, wondering like every other struggling artist in that city whether it was ever going to happen. When he heard The Dance, he reportedly sat very still. He wanted to record it immediately, but his label, Capitol Nashville, was not enthusiastic. The song was slow. It was philosophical. It didn't have the hooky, radio-friendly energy they were looking for from a new act trying to establish himself. There were conversations about whether it should even make the album. Brooks fought for it. He fought for it the way you fight for something when you just know that it's true. When his debut album was released in 1989, The Dance was included. It was released as a single in 1990 after If Tomorrow Never Comes and Not Counting You had already charted. It became his third number 1, but the number doesn't capture it. The music video intercut with footage of John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., Keith Whitley, Lane Frost, and others who died young and lived fully, turned the song from a love ballad into something much larger. It became a meditation on loss and choice, and the impossible math of whether it's better to love and lose than to never risk at all. The video was named Video of the Year at the 1990 Country Music Association Awards. The song has been covered hundreds of times. It has played at funerals and weddings and graduations. It has been the last song at more concerts than anyone has counted. And Tony Arata, the songwriter who wrote it alone, who played it at small showcases to politely applauding rooms, received a call one morning telling him that Garth Brooks was recording his song. He has said in interviews that he sat down on the floor and cried. There's a version of this story where the label wins, where The Dance gets cut from the album, where it becomes a demo that sits in a filing cabinet in Nashville and never reaches anyone. That version doesn't exist, but it almost did. 2 left. And these final 2 stories go deeper than charts, deeper than awards, deeper than anything the industry tried to measure. These are songs that changed what country music was allowed to be. Number 2, Fast Car, Tracy Chapman and its country rebirth.
I got a plan to get us out of here. Been working at the convenience store.
Here's a story in 2 acts, and the second act is the one that nobody saw coming. Tracy Chapman released Fast Car in 1988. She was a folk artist.
See, my old man's got a problem.
A black woman with a guitar and a voice that could silence a room. The song was not country. It was not marketed as country.
My old man's got a problem. Yeah, but the bottle, that's the way it is. He says, body.
It lived on folk radio and then crossed over to mainstream pop, reaching number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 and winning the Grammy Award for Best Female Pop Vocal Performance in 1989.
Working at the convenience store. Managed to save just a little bit of money.
It was a moment, a massive, defining moment. And then it faded, the way massive moments sometimes do.
School, that's what I do.
Into the category of classic song from the late 80s. Act 2 begins in 2023. Luke Combs, the North Carolina-born country giant who had become one of the genre's biggest commercial forces, recorded a cover of Fast Car.
You gotta make a decision. Leave tonight or live and die this way.
The country establishment was curious, but not certain. Was this the right song for Combs? Was it too far outside the genre? Would radio accept it? Radio didn't just accept it, it devoured it. Luke Combs' version of Fast Car reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart. It spent weeks at the top. And in doing so, it made Tracy Chapman, 35 years after writing the original, a country chart topper for the first time in her career. Chapman received co-writing credit. She received royalties. And at the 2024 Grammy Awards, she appeared on stage and performed the song live with Luke Combs, her first live performance in years. The reaction in the arena was described by journalists who were there as genuinely electric. People who hadn't thought about that song in a decade were on their feet. And here is the question that nobody in the industry had asked in 1988 or 1990 or 2000 or 2010. Was Fast Car always a country song? The themes, the economic anxiety, the desperate hope. The pickup truck running hard down a dark road towards something better than what you left behind. That's not folk. That's not pop. That is country music in its bones. It just took 35 years and a kid from North Carolina to prove it. One left. And this final story. This is the one that started everything. The song that was so real, so raw. So completely unlike anything Nashville had heard, that the industry rejected it before the ink was dry. And then it became the blueprint.
Make a decision. Leave tonight or live and die this way.
Number 1. He thinks he'll keep her. Mary Chapin Carpenter, 1992.
She does the carpool. She beats.
Mary Chapin Carpenter was a critically beloved artist, but commercially, she was considered a critic's darling.
She drives all day.
Which in Nashville is sometimes a polite way of saying, We don't know how to sell you.
She delivered number 3. And
She had won awards. She had fans. But radio had always held her slightly at arm's length.
Christmas card showed a perfect family.
Her songs were too literary, too nuanced, too willing to sit in uncomfortable emotional territory without offering a neat resolution.
Number 3. And every Christmas.
Then she wrote, "He thinks he'll keep her." Oh, the title came from a Geritol commercial, an old tagline where a husband brags about his wife.
He sits and waits. Oh, with no express.
"My wife, I think I'll keep her." Carpenter heard it and felt something turn cold inside her.
Showed a perfect family.
She took that one sentence, that smugly possessive little sentence, and built around it a full portrait of a woman who disappears inside her own life.
Love you anymore. Yeah.
Married at 20, 3 kids by 23, same house, same town, same expectations.
Her face when she was 36.
And one day, she walks out. Not dramatically, not with a speech. She just leaves.
When she was 36, she met him.
Radio wasn't sure. The song didn't have a conventional chorus. It didn't resolve happily. There was no redemption arc for the husband, no warm reconciliation, no lesson delivered with a smile.
15 years she had a job and not one raise.
Just a woman who reaches a quiet, devastating conclusion. This is not my life.
With no expression upon her face.
Some programmers passed. The song was considered too subtle, too sparse, too uncommercial. But it found its audience. Because the audience was everywhere.
One raise and pay. Now she's in the
It reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles Chart in 1993. It won the Country Music Association Award for Single of the Year.
Now she's in the typing pool
And at the 1994 Grammy Awards, Mary Chapin Carpenter won Best Female Country Vocal Performance for it, her 5th Grammy in 4 years. But the impact goes beyond those numbers.
Ladies and gentlemen, Trisha Yearwood, Susie.
He Thinks He'll Keep Her arrived at a precise moment in American culture, the early 90s, when women's voices in country music were finally beginning to accumulate enough force to be undeniable. Reba McEntire had laid groundwork. Winona was rising.
She keeps him fair when she.
Faith Hill was coming. The Chicks were 2 years away from everything. And in the middle of all that momentum,
When she was 21,
Mary Chapin Carpenter wrote a quiet, devastating song about a woman who stops performing her own life. And the country audience recognized her immediately because she was their mother, their sister, their neighbor, themselves.
design, spit and polish till it shines.
The Suits had said, too subtle. The listeners said, that's my story. And in the end, the listeners are the only ones who get a vote that actually matters.
Oh, with no expression.
That is the lesson. It has always been the lesson. And in country music, it will always be the lesson.
Upon her